My name is Jeff Morgan. I'm from Dallas, Texas. This video was just basically to say thank you to the people that have subscribed and that have followed this channel. As of yesterday, I believe it was, I hit 7,000 subscribers, and I just, again, want to say thank you to all of you. When I first started doing this YouTube channel, I figured that I probably would get almost nobody to actually follow it. I was talking about the issue of no-fault divorce. I started talking about parental alienation and things along those lines. I had no idea personally that this was going to be anything that would attract anybody. And I just want to say thank you once again for doing this. So I thought I'd also recap to those who are new that may not know my own story. I don't like to focus on it a whole lot, but I do. It still drives me and it still motivates me. Back in 2012, I was working on a presidential campaign. I was working for Santorum for president. And during that time, right after Rick withdrew from the primary when he was running against Mitt Romney, my ex-wife filed for no-fault divorce. I never thought that a person could file for no-fault divorce and basically get everything, and there would be no findings of facts about anything. Because this was a divorce that, in my opinion at the time, was probably the stupidest divorce in the history of Texas. Judge Brett Hall of the 382nd District Court in Rockwall, Texas, I've gone to him personally afterwards, and what he said is that, well, I had to grant a divorce. I just had to do this. I have no option. Now, first off, Brett Hall does not understand the Texas Family Code, does not understand the law, but that was his excuse for destroying a family. Her attorney was this guy called Schurenberg, Charles Schurenberg. He was supposedly one of these most moral attorneys, and I have nothing but disdain for him. He was the one that told me, you're going to get a divorce and there's nothing you can do about it. And I had no idea that the laws in Texas would support him the way that, and support my ex-wife the way that they did. Divorce on demand, divorce for any reason, for no reason. You can make up a reason. You can be at fault for a divorce and then also file for no-fault divorce. And then you can also take the goodies from the marriage. You can take the house, you can take the property, you can take everything else. I had no idea that the state was so unjust. I started to learn about it at the time, and that's when I started to speak out about no-fault divorce. I said two things. Number one, I'm going to get myself healed from this thing that happened in my own life. And after that, I am going to change the laws in the state of Texas. So that was my motivation. Whether I could do so or not, I had no idea, but that was what kept me driving and kept me going. Everybody told me, Jeff, she's already got somebody hooked up. And I said, no, there's no way. That's not who she is. We had served in missions together. We'd gone to Bible college. I'd gone to seminary. She was there. We started businesses together. Within 17 days after she got her divorce, she was in a relationship with the man who's now her husband, who was a divorced pastor pastoring a church down in Huntsville, Texas. But no-fault divorce is filled with so much lies, so many lies. No-fault divorce is divorce on demand. It's often a forced thing. And then, you get an attorney that's going to abuse you even further. Anyway, that's kind of what happened there. So that's when I decided I was going to start changing the laws. I was married by the church, right? And yet a judge can come in and say, I'm sorry, it doesn't make a difference that you got married by the church. I'm judge. I can just destroy your marriage. And marriage is supposed to be a sacrament of the church. For some people, it's an ordinance of the church. It's a big religious liberty issue, and the state says, screw your religious liberty issue, screw marriage. For any reason, for no reason, they can divorce you. You don't have to get married in Texas, but you can come to Texas and get a divorce. 60 days after you file for divorce, the judge can grant it. And according to Judge Brett Hall of the 382nd, he had no option. He had to grant it. That was his excuse. And when I saw that, I started to go to other court hearings for other people as well. In the last year and a half, 2 years, I would say I've been to well over 100 hearings, either in person or virtually. And I've watched these judges again and again and again destroy families and come up with fictitious reasons by which they lawfully kick a man or a woman, a father or a mother, out of a child's life, by which they imprison somebody because he or she is not able to pay child support, by which they take property from one person and divide it to somebody else because, well, he makes more money than she does and everything's going to be fine. This is crap all the way through, thoroughly, through and through, it's crap. But it's not just been the judges that I've seen the attorneys. The attorneys, as I mentioned, they bully people. That was the case with my ex-wife. She got this attorney and she's like, oh, he's such a grandfatherly type. And then at one point in time I said, why don't you have him stop? Because she said she wasn't sure whether she should go through with it. Have him stop. Well, he's got to do his attorney thing. She was afraid to fire the guy. His name is Charles Schurenberg. Once again, most moral man. Wonderful, wonderful attorney, right? And he comes and he's threatening me and everything else. And this is the attorney. Well, I can't stop the attorney. I'm afraid of him. Really? This is what happens? You become afraid of your attorney? And Charles Schurenberg, he was the first person, maybe the only person that I've ever said, I hope he goes to hell. I hope he burns us in hell. And she's like, well, I can't believe that you would say that. Well, you know what? He thought so little, and he knew it never should have happened, but he was going after the money. Charles, the greedy guy, Schurenberg. Anyway, so those were some of the things that happened in my own life. I saw my family get destroyed. And then again, I was so very surprised. Within 17 days, she was already Facebook friends with the person that was going to be her new husband, a divorced pastor pastoring at First Baptist Church in Huntsville, Texas. Anyway, like I said, we have the divorce attorneys, we have the judges, we have very bad laws. Divorce on demand is what we have. We call it insupportability. Well, the marriage is insupportable, and the judge may grant a divorce. The judge may grant a divorce without apportioning fault over insupportability. What happens in Texas is that in almost every single instance, almost 100% of the time, they will grant a divorce, and they do no findings of facts, no conclusions of law. They just say, well, we're going to just grant the divorce. I don't want a divorce. Tough. The divorce is inevitable, and the attorneys are going to rob your money, basically, to try to get you a better settlement. If I've done nothing wrong, why should I? And I'm not saying that in any marriage, in every marriage, both parties will do something wrong. The essence of the marriage covenant, when you take a covenant before God, is that you know you have married another sinner. You are both sinners, and yet you have committed before God, in the presence of many witnesses, you've taken a vow to God, which the state says, screw your vow. You've taken a vow to God that in spite of whatever these differences are, you are going to love, honor, and cherish your wife, and the wife is supposed to honor and obey and respect her husband. And it's a lifetime marriage. That's what you committed to. And yet the church, what a wonderful institution the church has been throughout this whole thing. When I first found out about this, I went to the pastor of the church that my ex-wife was attending. I wasn't attending the church because I saw a lot of church politics there, and I just thought, I'm not going to put up with this, but that's where she was going. Ridgeview Church out in Rockwall, Texas. Matt Geisinger used to be a friend of mine. At this point, I call him an acquaintance only, somebody that I know. I think Matt miserably failed. I went to see him a couple of times, and Matt, I'm sorry, but you just lacked a moral backbone. I went back to the church about a year and a half later, and the church threatened to have me put in jail if I came into the church again. David Shepard was the executive pastor. So that church failed. My former father-in-law, Pastor Richley, he's a pastor. He's not a pastor. What happened is he was involved in missions. He got a commission, a license or something like that for ordination when he was with the mission. When he left the mission, his ordination ceased. But he's still using his ordination as if he's a pastor. He was not a pastor at the time that he married us. I did not know this at the time. I had no reason to even investigate it. But Rich Lee, another guy, pastor, missionary, great man of God, and he decides, because he himself had a lot of history with marital problems between him and his own wife. There were issues that had taken place in his marriage, and I know because I was there, I saw it. But Rich Lee, that godly man, that godly pastor, I guess he and his daughter, from what my ex-wife said, used to get up and talk in the morning via the internet and talk about how miserable the marriages were. Now, I wasn't aware of this anyway, but both of them had done certain things which caused some of the misery in their marriage. So anyway, but they're talking, and then Rich Lee, the great white knight, Rich Lee, he decided that he was going to finance the divorce. I was trying to slow things down because the divorce never should have happened. As I've said repeatedly, I thought it was the stupidest divorce in Texas at the time, the most unnecessary divorce, the most preventable divorce, and yet the courts, the laws, the attorneys, and even Pastor Rich Lee all facilitated this. Pastor Rich Lee, and here's Pastor Rich Lee, the great pastor, the godly pastor, that, you know, I met him when I was at Bible college. My ex-wife was up at Bible college, that's where we met each other. He came up there and, Jeff this and Jeff that, and getting recommendations on Bible commentaries and everything else. And we'll talk about things. And he said, well, I'm not a very smart person, but, you know, you've got the knowledge, I've got the experience, I'm a go-getter and stuff like that. Well, Rich Lee decides that he is going to adopt the position, I guess, that no-fault divorce is okay. completely against Scripture, completely crooked in the way that he did it. So he and his daughter made a deal. He would loan her or give her $40,000 to $45,000 to finance her keeping the house. Rich Lee is a liar, and I don't have any problem calling him that. And his wife is even worse. Compared to his wife, perhaps Rich Lee looks like an honest person. But his wife, who used to be, Yvonne Lee, who used to be a wonderful, godly Christian person, would never, ever tell a lie. She has become just as corrupt as Rich. So I don't know which one of them is better, which one of them is worse. But anyway, Pastor Rich Lee decides that he's going to finance a divorce and destroy the family of his grandchildren. How is that? What a godly, godly pastor he is. And so what I decided to do is that I tried to go to him. I went to the church. The church, after a year of writing to them about what took place, told them, hey, if this were a minor issue, would not be writing to you. But they decided they were going to side with Rich Lee because Rich Lee was a missionary. He was a missionary to Mexico. He was God's anointed. God's anointed can do no wrong. So it's Christ Community Center or something like that up in Addy, Washington. I got a letter from them telling me that they've investigated this, and you know what they did? They got my ex-wife to write a letter on their behalf stating what godly people they were. And you know what? Here's the really bad thing about Rich and Yvonne Lee. They'd been a missionary too. They had helped to support me when I was overseas. I was supporting them when they were in Mexico. But that's the point. I was financially supporting them. This is what they did, Rich and Yvonne Lee, to a financial supporter. We were contributing about $100 a month, and it was coming from my paycheck supporting Rich and Yvonne Lee down in Mexico as they were planting churches. When I asked him to help us work through this stuff, because he was the only one that my ex-wife would look up to at the time, he whiffed. And then he later on apologized for not having enough knowledge. He intentionally whiffed. And again, maybe it was because of his own situation that had happened in his past as well. But like I said, he completely whiffed. And then he lied about the whole thing to me. The only reason I found out about all of this money that was being transacted back and forth and the interest rate that she would be paying him, which according to her mother was so much better than what the banks could give. See, this was during 2012, the banks are paying, what, 0.1% or something like that, maybe even less than that. And my ex-wife was going to pay them back 3.25%. Oh, how good that would be for their retirement accounts. So anyway, like I said, the first thing that I've looked at was the issue of no-fault divorce. People looked at me when I started talking about this like I was crazy. And what is no-fault divorce? But it's been very interesting because the people that were fighting for 50-50 shared parenting, as they started to hear me, they said, you know, we never even knew what you were talking about, but now we think you're right. We think that no-fault divorce is the bigger issue by far than 50-50. Because no-fault divorce, what it does, it lets the government be daddy and mommy to your children. It lets the government come into your marriage and say, we've got control over your marriage. But wait a minute, I had a vow to God, we made a commitment to God, we made a vow to God, this is stronger than any prenuptial, and the government says, screw you. We are going to be the new God. We're just going to dissolve your marriage at will because one person wants it. Nothing legal about it. The courts will always side with the person who wants out. But then what happens is after that, now the person who files for divorce, who gets the divorce, who's hooked up with her new husband already 17 days, the ink is still wet on the paper, and now she's got to construct a news story about how violent I was. And that is very interesting because, you know, I'm like, I'd never even heard of these things. And somebody said, well, I saw your wife's post on Facebook. And they were like, you're a violent person? She made this sound like, you know, God had delivered her from this violent person. It was a bunch of crap. I don't know whether she was involved with John Wygant, the pastor of First Baptist Church, prior to the divorce. I have no idea. I really don't care. I did write to him afterwards. I wrote to him at his church. I wrote to him privately. And what I think happened is I think maybe a church secretary read the email first before it got passed on to him. And within about a month, from what I've heard, he was fired. He was fired from the church, and that was the only church that got it right. First Baptist Church of Huntsville, Texas, got it right, if that's indeed what happened. Because first I was being told about what a bitter person I was to get John Wygant fired from his church as pastor. Well, all I said to him as a pastor was that, have you asked to reconcile with her husband? Because from the scripture, the marriage that they were going to be involved in was illegitimate, never should have happened. Then they had to reconstruct that story too. First I was accused of the bitterness and I got him fired, and then it was like, oh no, he voluntarily resigned. Whatever. There's so much lying with regard to divorce. Well, then what happened? My daughter had the first child out of wedlock, and then she was going back to live with my ex-wife at the house. I gave up the house so that my girls would have a place to grow. My son was out on his own. My son was able to take care of himself. He had his own place. He's a smart guy. He does well in business and everything he does. But I had two girls, and one was going through college trying to become a nurse. The other one had other dreams and aspirations, but she got pregnant a second time. And what had happened was, because of during this time that she was living with them, she was going from place to place because my ex-wife and her new husband made life so miserable for her that she thought it would be easier and less stressful to go from place to place. Ended up moving back in with her old boyfriend, shacked up with him, and got pregnant a second time. At least that's the story that she told me at the time. I have no idea anymore whether it's true or not. So now we have two children born. I was finally able to see my daughter, and I was able to first off see my oldest grandson, Cruz, and then my younger grandson, Gideon. And for about 8 months, I babysat them. Probably about 8 months, I babysat them almost nonstop, sometimes up to 5 times a week, several times a week, at least weekly, often 2-3 times a week, sometimes 5 times a week. I was the go-to person. When she didn't have babysitting, I was the go-to person. There was only one time that I said I couldn't do it because Karen and I were going out that weekend. It was the first time we had been able to get away for a while in Fort Worth. It wasn't that far away. But that was the only time that I'm aware of that I could not do it, that I could not step in and watch the children. Anyway, all of this stuff happened that CPS got involved. I got blamed for it. I got sued. My daughter sued me even though I had nothing to do with it. And then my ex-wife got up on the stand, committed perjury. But perjury is nothing that gets punished in the state of Texas. So, you know, I could not believe it. I had to spend $20,000 defending myself against both a protective order. It wasn't even a restraining order, a protective order. And then they tried to do something criminal, or I don't even know exactly the way the whole thing, I don't even know what it was about, to be honest with you. At the trial, she basically said that the accusation was that I'd called her a bad mother. I mean, seriously? So she made me spend $20,000, risked having me lose my job, risked having me be incarcerated, risked having me have to give up my weapons, everything. And I don't have that many weapons, but this is what would have happened had she prevailed. And yet, you know, it was bad because usually the lady who accuses wins. In this instance, the judge found absolutely no evidence. In fact, she found contradictory testimony. In other words, the judge realized my daughter, my ex-wife, and my daughter's ex-boyfriend were all committing perjury. And yet, I got to not see my grandchildren after that. My ex-wife, who wanted to have my daughter put the grandchildren up for adoption, put them up for adoption. We've got to help her put them up for the adoption. I never wanted to do that. My ex-wife now gets to see the grandchildren. And I can't see them because of this whole crap that has taken place. This is where the other church comes in. Shoreline Church, this wonderful, godly church. I mean, they're going to bring the kingdom of heaven down to earth. And you can look at them. Every, Thanksgiving time, they have a new mission goal. They're going to raise $750,000 one year to help bring the kingdom of heaven down to earth. And then I think the next year was $800,000. They're going to bring the kingdom of heaven down to earth. And then I think last year was $10 million. With $10 million, they were going to bring the kingdom of heaven down to earth. Well, I went to that church because I found out that's where she was going. I talked with one man there, Eddie Mills, and he was a good guy. Well, he referred me to somebody else. His name was Jordan Murillo. Jordan Murillo basically had to take the position that I was an abusive father, and that his role in church security was to protect my daughter. The whole thing was garbage. My daughter used to stay at my house. I was watching the grandkids all the time. I was the one that was taking care of them. I was the one that was helping her with bills. I was doing all of this stuff. And yet Jordan Murillo, simply because he wanted to, I don't know. He said he was investigating things. Well, I had some hope in him at one time because he had alienated himself from his own father. And I thought, well, maybe there's a person who understands alienation and will help. Jordan Murillo was also another person that threatened me that if I ever came to the church, that he would have the Dallas police force there to haul me away. I had a picture with me, my wife, my stepson, and his service dog, and a nurse. And he gave that picture, he said, to the police so that if I came by, I would be arrested. Isn't that something? The Church of God, once again, threatening people. After he made all these accusations and had to protect my daughter from this dangerous, dangerous man that I am, I sent him the court transcript, to which he said, oh, it appears that he is not telling us the entire truth. It was plain as day. And I am going to put that court transcript out here because at a certain point, this happened a number of years ago, I think that we need to talk about what takes place in these courts. I know because I've seen it firsthand and because I've experienced it firsthand. But anyway, another church, great church, Shoreline City Church, Pastor Earl McClellan. I met with Pastor Earl McClellan in person. I had a nurse with me. I had Matthew in a wheelchair, the service dog, and Pastor Earl McClellan like, well, we're going to have to give this over to Jordan, and he'll take care of it. I think maybe I know a little something about it. This church miserably failed. Not only did they miserably fail me, they have miserably failed my grandchildren. I've not seen my grandchildren for 7.5 years. And that's when I said, okay, you're going to do this to me. I'm going to start fighting back. I'm going to expose this whole rotten, filthy mess. You have destroyed families. You've destroyed the relationship that my grandchildren and I had. I was the only stable male in their life up until the point that they were taken from me. So anyway, that's a little bit of my own brief recap of how I got involved in some of this stuff. And then, as I said, I've met other people, and it seems that every time I go to court, it gets worse and worse and worse. I found out about issues like 2503, the interference with child custody. I found out about the idea of the 50-50 equal shared parenting. This was nothing that I really thought about. I was just brought up that, you know, usually the mother gets the custody, the father pays this or whatever. It can be so unjust the way that the state handles things. Again, I've watched judge after judge after judge, male, female. I've watched it in Dallas. I've watched it in Collin County, Rockwall, Parker County. I've gone down to Burnett. I've seen it in the Houston area, in Austin, in San Antonio, anywhere. It doesn't make a difference. This whole system needs to just be completely abolished, and it needs to be redone completely, or just abolished, and give marriage back to the church where it should be. If you want to have a civil marriage, fine, have a civil marriage. But when the state gets involved with a church marriage, that's a recipe for disaster. The state becomes God. The state thinks that they own your children. I've seen the state and judges and attorneys advocate to kick a good parent out of a child's life. And in my instance, it was a grandparent. I can tell you that without any hesitation, I put myself in the top 10%, if not higher, of grandparents out there. I was there all the time. And they tried to make me look like I was this evil person. And what I also saw too was that we have Republicans that buy along with this crap. I expect the Democrats, by and large, to be against this because it's not in their agenda. A lot of the Democrats, they want to destroy the families. They want to have feminism reign. They want to make men be evil. They've got to create victims, and then they've got to be the saviors for the victims. So I understand it for the most part, and I'm not saying 100%, but for the most part, you're not going to find sympathy among many of the Democratic politicians. But what has really struck me is that many of the Republicans have been almost as bad. There have been a few good ones. Matt Krause has taken up the no-fault divorce issue 3 consecutive sessions. Last session, I didn't think he was going to do it. He got it at the end. But this whole system is rigged. We have lobbyists. The Texas Family Law Foundation, they hire people like Steve and Amy Breslin. What great people these people are. These people should be considered crooks as far as I'm concerned. When you think about lobbyists, think about people that actually use bribery and corruption. And I will be putting out some videos later on about Steve and Amy Breslin. We've been collecting evidence on them, so that's going to come out probably in a couple of months here. We're going to start talking about them. We're going to talk about child custody evaluators. Alyssa Sherry, she is a joke of a person. She's a committed feminist, and she's terrible. I've watched Dr. Benjamin L. Britton. Another guy, he went to Dallas Theological Seminary. What he's done has been abusive, and I've watched it again and again and again. The only thing I can say, if I compare the system, our family court system, our CPS system, to Saddam Hussein and the Mukhabarat. Saddam Hussein, who used to take fathers out of the house and kill them because he wanted to plunder their money. The family courts and the whole family court system in Texas is it's at least on the same playing field, if not worse. They will eliminate a parent, a grandparent, an entire side of the child's family, and call it acting in the best interest of the child while charging you $400, $500, $600, $700, $800 an hour or more. and you have no recourse. The judges hate to see pro se litigants in there. They always expect you to go by an attorney and to have the attorney represent you. I've seen this in person. David Rakow, another judge out in Rockwall. Well, you know what? I expect you to have an attorney here. Graham Kiesenberry, Parker County, the same thing. Well, why don't you have an attorney? The attorneys help to fund the judge's campaign, and you know what? They're not going to be able to fund their campaign so well if they're not getting some money from somebody, and then they appoint child custody evaluators who just so happen to be friends of the court, friends of the judge. This is an incestuous relationship here. Anyway, so I digress as to how I got involved in this stuff. You know, I plan to keep on attacking this stuff until we take it down. I just meant originally to say thank you for being a subscriber. Thank you for, when I've gone places, many people have told me thank you for what I've put out. I really had no idea what I was doing. I just said, I cannot be silent. This is a great evil, and we cannot be silent. And please, use your own voice. I mean, yes, I said I've been well over 100 court hearings, but you know, and I know that other people can't do this, but can you commit to go to 5 court hearings with a friend this upcoming year? If you're not 5, can you do 2? Can you just see what's going on? And our legislators, I think our legislators, it should be obligatory for them, obligatory, no exceptions, that our legislators must attend at least 1 day of hearings a quarter, and preferably more, to see how abusive these courts are and how they are destroying families. And I'll also say this to the Republicans. You know, you say, well, you know, we've got to stand up for these things. You are creating a pipeline of Democrats. Your policies, which you have helped to go along with and not oppose, they may have been put out by radical feminists and everything else, but you've gone along with them by and large. You've gone along with them. These are going to undermine your party. Children who are raised in households largely by single mothers, and this is not against any single mothers, but children who are children of divorce being reared in single-parent households are going to be voting Democrat. Almost 1.5 million children are in the Texas Attorney General. He says that he has responsibility to make sure they get child support. 1.5 million children, you've got your pipeline of Democrats. You don't even have to worry about illegals coming across the border and being given cards to vote Democrat. You're creating your own Democrats here right now. That's what's going on. And you're surprised that Texas is turning purple? Seriously? You're part of the problem. So anyway, again, like I said, I started to do this. I had no idea what I was doing. I figured that whatever I started to do, I better be willing to do things poorly and be laughed at and mocked, and maybe in time I would get a little bit better. There are a number of other people that are so much better, but I do what I can. And that's all I'm asking. If you are a grandparent, if you're a parent who's gone through this, you might be a son or a daughter, a child of divorce, get up and speak, use your voice. We have individual voices. What we need to do is join all of our voices together so that we destroy the entire divorce industry. And make no mistake about it, it is big business. It is not looking out for the best interest of the child. Nobody even knows what the best interest of the child is. They talk about the best interest of the child. Ask them to define what that is. They can't do it. There is no definition. The best interest of the child might be to have a child's penis cut off and have him turned into a girl, or have him go through chemical castration. That's in the best interest of the child. And you can ask Jessica Janicek out of Coons Fuller about that, because that's what Jessica Janicek has been defending, Coons Fuller law firm. Coons Fuller has been in several of the law cases that I've seen, a terrible, in my opinion, immoral, corrupt law firm that that there's nothing that I respect about them. They are greedy from my perspective. They are corrupt from my perspective. They are unjust from my perspective. They are exploitive and abusive from my perspective. Anyway, once again, thank you. This is just a brief history for me. I hope I didn't come across like I actually did have an outline made up, but I lost it on the way from my home to the park here. I've got to get back and be doing some other things today. Hope I didn't blab too much about some stuff, didn't go too far out of bounds. But we have to take down this anti-family corruption industry, and we have to talk with our legislators about passing good laws. We need to get into our courts. We need to be recording our courts. I don't care if you have to take secret cameras in. I don't care if you have to take video cameras in. There is no law against you recording. These are rules. It's a constitutional issue, I believe, at stake here. I've had more than one attorney that said, go ahead, do this stuff. We will defend you. We would love to take this to the Supreme Court. And by the way, the Supreme Court, they broadcast all of their hearings. They archive them online, but somehow these family court judges, they're just too important. You know, they're mulling over such weighty matters. They would never act with injustice and corruption. We need to hide our stuff so that you can't see what's going on. But they're just too important that, you know, we cannot have this disruption taking place. If it doesn't bother the Supreme Court of Texas, if it doesn't bother the U.S. Supreme Court, all of this stuff is available. We need to know how our government is operating, and we need to hold our judges accountable for what they're doing, and our attorneys. Anyway, that's it for me for right now. I've gone on way too long. Appreciate this once again. Thank you for subscribing. I always appreciate the fact that I see people that have subscribed, and I want to thank you, many of you too, for the words that you've spoken to me to encourage me, because there have been many times that I've wondered whether it was even worth it doing this stuff. It's for my own conscience, but I also hope too that it becomes that I'm part of a movement. What I said at the beginning is that I hoped, I figured that it would have to be somebody much smarter, much more eloquent, with much more influence than I did to help to break this thing down. But my intent was to pick up a sledgehammer and to be swinging at the base, knowing that at least to some degree I've weakened the base so this whole thing can come crashing down and we can get rid of this communistic, atheistic, immoral system that is evil beyond anything that you can even imagine, almost, in my opinion. Anyway, that's it. Thanks so much. I appreciate it. Thank you.